Each of the four feature panelists here speak a little bit about their project and what they're working on. And then after that, we're going to do a Q&A panel with some prepared questions from both us and then the community itself. And then if time permitting, we'll also have questions from the audience. So I would also just like to add, it's a pretty impressive group of people here. I think it's pretty much packed wall to wall. So thank you guys for So the first person who will present his project is Rong Cheng, who's the founder of Elastos and is also a professor at Tsinghua University in the Cyber and Intelligence Economy and Blockchain for the postgraduate model. He was one of the earliest Microsoft employees from 1992 to 2000, and also founded a company called Cordite Corp in 2000, which was invested in by Foxconn and Tsinghua University. So today he's going to present what he's working on now, called Elastos. And I also heard that they're going to announce their pre-ICO shortly.
First of all, thank you for attending tonight's meetup. Here I'm going to show you a phone, which is actually from my last incarnation, which is 5 years ago. Started investing by Foxconn, making an industrial IoT kind of device. If you look at this phone, it's Android 5 compatible. It looks very much like Android 5. But guess what? It's completely in C++. So we translated all Android Java framework and Android Java class libraries into C++. Okay? It's not for efficiency, it's for security. The reason being that when you write something in JavaScript, in Java, it couldn't do 100% of the apps. Sometimes you have to resort to the Linux level, to the CPU instruction level, like deep learning kind of algorithms, codecs, game engines, whatnot. But then when you're down to Linux, you are going to have the capability to launch DDoS attacks, middleman attacks, malware, viruses, all those things. The reason why we do it in C++ so that you can run all the above without accessing the internet. We definitely prohibit people using sockets. So we ban internet altogether. Instead, we are still able to let you access from phone to smart routers, and through a technology called reflections. Okay, we're not going to go to that details, but then this incarnation we found blockchain. We're working with Neil on our public chain. We're going to do a public testing by the end of this month. So we're going to issue our coin by the end of this month. And since we have done the private crowdfunding in June, in 3 months, that's a life, right? We come back to life from the dirt. And you know how hard it is, like Neil, like us. I mean, Neil, he's the star of the day, but he was in dirt, right? But now it's the international community pulled him out, okay? People here came from drive all the way from LA and meet the God and going back. And so the reason why we're here is that we've been doing those open source projects, begging for money through most of the corporations you know. I don't want to name the names, right? But then the big ones in China, I've been through all of them. And we survived, guess what? 17 years for this, okay? It's not that easy task until we're reborn. And with the blockchain, we're going to issue decentralized IDs to all the virtual machines, the browsers, the websites, and the digital assets. So now this life, we're building the virtual machines, the virtual browsers, and virtual websites, and virtual digital contents. Make them trackable on the blockchain. We don't need anybody's permission to get IDs, yet the websites are all trustworthy. The digital contents have scarcity, the tokens can circulate, right? And there, never forget, you need an execution environment, so-called dApps, or just apps for the mobile device. And the dApps, we have two definitions, ambiguous definitions. We don't believe in the dApps definition of Ethereum, because we don't believe in dApps running on blockchains. We want the dApps running on your mobile device, on the websites, on PCs, on cloud servers. We want the cloud drives, right? Because if you prefer Dropbox, you prefer OneDrive, I prefer a NAS storage on my smart router. Everyone have their own preference. Instead of the model of we have an Amazon cloud, Alibaba cloud, like a WeChat cloud, everybody commuting the social networks through those centralized clouds. We want to own, each one of us to own our own data. Yet, the game has exactly the same user experience, right? Same performance. So that we call dApps, right? The IDs are controlled by no one. Yet we have trust. The tokens on this web, we can pass, share peer-to-peer, sell ebooks, sell movies, sell games, right? And so we dictate, the authors dictate their own smart contract on the profit sharing instead of some party sharing 30% of it. If you know what's the sharing model in China, the big players, I don't want to name anyone, they share at least 80% of the intellectual properties of gaming, ebooks, whatnot. In China, that's 80%. Because of the sheer population, even though the author makes 20%, that's a lot of money. Okay? But now we want to give that share back to the authors, back to the community with the support of blockchain. So we're doing the blockchain with Neo, and also because we're building, on top of it, building a peer-to-peer network like eDonkey. Here's the author we should thank for, Jed, right? So we actually started 5 years ago. We have done peer-to-peer network. The reason we've done it, actually we have nothing better than what Jed have done, but we wanted completely open source the software stack. So we have the blockchain completely open. We have the peer-to-peer network completely open. We have the virtual machines completely open. When we upload all our source code to GitHub, it got gorged because it's more than 10 million lines of code. Okay, easily will be the largest blockchain-based application in the world. We are building a so-called smart web. Considering why it's a smart web, it's a web of instant apps. So then through social networks, we can pass apps. Instead of URL links, you get data, right? You got information. Can you get apps running? Where you need a virtual machine to support this model. The virtual machines we can trust. We get IDs from a blockchain. We got tokens from blockchain. But then, that's what we're doing. We partner with Neo, and also because of the smart web, we're also building so-called next generation of browser. It's a very isolated computation environment. Basically, we put a Chrome source code, compile it into a single process. There we have a peer-to-peer network. We disallow any IP address in our browser. No IP addresses no more. And it's all UUID. Through UUID, we find your service. We hook up virtual channels. You get input, and we get you the information you need. We pass the executable codes around.
By the way, I think about 10 minutes more. She's doing the same.
All right. So basically, that's what I'm here for. We're looking for the international community and crowd. We're doing crowdfunding.
Okay, and then for our next speaker, so Jun Lee is the co-founder of Ontology, and he was also the co-founder and chief architect of OnChain. He's had 16 years of experience in the financial industry, and was previously the technical architect of the China Financial Future Exchange. So today he's going to share a little bit more about the Ontology product and what they're doing.
And a lot of people from the Neo community know the OnChain. So, but not clear about the relation between the OnChain and Neo. Actually, OnChain and Neo, OnChain is a private company focused on the technical service based on blockchain. And they have one of same founder, Hongfei. Hongfei is founder of Neo, also the CEO of OnChain. OnChain also work with Elastos for the blockchain part and the consensus model part. And on-chain's previous work is do the technical service, build the blockchain, the enterprise level blockchain for the governments and enterprise. And recently we have beginning build our, actually it's almost done in the first version for the public platform. It's called ontology. Ontology is defined as a distributed trust network. So the key word is trust. Actually, trust has become a popular word recent year because blockchain. Every time people talk about blockchain, always mention trust, 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 build trust, and new trust model. But once I looked in at this word, I was thinking, where's the trust actually from? So I list all the approach and the source they can build or create trust. It's actually quite a lot. So I categorize them to the 3 dimensions briefly. The first one from technology. I think everyone can understand that digital signature, the digital certification, a lot of the biometrics, all is kind of the trust built on technology. But one thing, they only finish one of the specific scenario. And blockchain come in, they build a mechanism or ecosystem architecture. They give us a complex trust model. It's a digital trust world, like digital currency, blockchain, in the smart contracts, the NEO or Ethereum. But that is good enough? The answer is maybe yes, maybe no. Because the connection with the digital trust world and the real world is very weak, you know that. Mostly in the real world is dependent on the second dimension, legal system. I know what you have, your house or other things is based on that, legal system from different countries. But the technology and the legal system still not cover all tax source. Another important source is from a community, or people each other. You prove me, and I prove you. This kind of from community. But we have a lot of approach for trust. We still meet a lot of issues. I know it's about that, many issues about the trust. A lot of cost will be based on the different scenario. You know, it's trust for things. And so based on that, we want to have the new trust ecosystem. So that's kind of the infrastructure. The architecture level is a public blockchain, but not only one blockchain. It's kind of chain network. So we have a multiple blockchain. Why need a multiple blockchain for that? Because for the different scenario, they actually need a different governance model based on different consensus model. So we cannot only use one chain to do everything. We need a chain network focus on or meet different requirements from a different scenario based on that. And above this level, we need more protocol. Because the cross-chain protocol, not only the digital assets exchange, it's just one of type of those kind of cross-chain interaction. A lot of like the entity mapping or the data exchange. So a lot of different blockchain for different scenario for the interaction between the cross-chain scenario. So those modules have a different protocol. And furthermore, we need more modules or the protocols for different industry. One thing we think is, yes, blockchain have a lot of technology team for that. But you want to have a more big than the blockchain industry. We need more the best team from different industry. They can use the blockchain to build their service as a distributed or decentralized way. But they be blocked by the technical background or cost. We need to build a bridge to help those kind of team to into the blockchain industry. And no matter they have the blockchain technology background or not. So we need a lot of module focused on different scenarios, like I mentioned, the ontology. One of is a distributed identity service, but not we private identity service. We just like the marketplace. Different identity service, verification service can private the service provider can private the service, list the service on that. You can choose what kind of service you want to use for different scenarios. So everyone have a kind of trust package. You can prove yourself whenever you are going to go all over the world. Use different information. Because every time when the government, when your friends, when the employee company or the financial institution ask, who are you? The answer is different. The information they want also is different. So you need a way to prove yourself. But in currently, this kind of process is time-consuming and the high cost. because you need to collect different materials, use different technology, and prove yourself. They need private, spend a lot of cost or time to verify, this is true, this is not. If we have a way can easily and automatically do that, is better. So, okay, the final one, and this scenario will be back expanded to the more scenario like the distributed data exchange, dispute reputation system. A lot of credit score based on different information to verify you or evaluate you, and more dispute community and based on the blockchain. We have a future dispute of Facebook or Twitter based on that. Based on that, we have a dispute trust search engine. In that world, we still have the search engine like Google or social network like Facebook. The difference is whatever you searched out, people, information, and objects, you can verify what is real, what is not, what is good, what is bad. Everyone can use this approach to control and protect your privacy, your data, your information. That is the next generation infrastructure for trust. Welcome to join us. Thank you.
He needs very little introduction, but he was the original founder of Ant Shares, which became Neo, and then also on-chain. So I'll just let you go for it.
It's so hot here. I feel the heat. Yeah. I'm the founder of Neo, also the founder and CEO of On-chain, the private company. And Li Jun is my co-founder with On-chain. I met Jed Mcaleb the first time, but I was and am a fan of him, and I used to think he's Mr. Satoshi. Okay. The first question Jed just asked me, throw at me, is what's the difference between Neo and Ethereum? Yeah, I think my introduction of myself, of Neo, will be focused on that part of the question. The best way to explain something to maybe familiar with. How many of you guys have been tried Ethereum?
Right here.
Wow, like 80%. Any of you tried Neo?
Right here.
Wow, it's like 70%. Okay. Maybe I don't need to explain it. Okay. I think the biggest difference between Neo and Ethereum is the design philosophy is quite different. With Neo, we're trying, the definition of Neo is probably it's not a blockchain. It's we call it an open network for smart economy. It's an open network, so it consists of networks and blockchains, and it is open, so it's a public blockchain, and it's built for a smart economy. But what is smart economy? I think in the future, the economy or the trade or the finance will be very transparent, be fair, be inclusive, and the cost of establishing trust will be very low, because today it's very, very expensive to build trust between people, between organizations. My wild guess will be there are more than maybe 1/2 of the costs are related to trust. All the lawyers, the accountants, the governments, all the regulations are to build or enforce trust. So the trust is very expensive. In the future, with blockchain technology and other technologies, I think the cost of trust will be minimal, and there will be very few middlemen in all the transactions, all the trades. So Neo is built for all this future smart economy, and everything will be automated, less human error, less human intervention, and more fair. So that's the design philosophy, and so we are an open network for smart economy. And if you open the website of Ethereum, you will see their definition is a blockchain app platform. And the first line after that is let's build unstoppable application, or anti-censorship, anonymous. So I think those are the keywords related to Ethereum. But with Neo, we want to be more compliant ready. Maybe it's not compliant 100% today, but we want to be compliant ready. I think it's time for blockchain to be connected to serve for the real economy, not just for doing some experimental things. I've been talked with many people that are involved with Ethereum, and lots of the dApps. Their tokens are heavily traded in different exchanges, but their dApps, their service, are not really being used. Very few people are really using Augur to do a future smart prediction. Very few people are really using those dApps. With NEO, we want to change that. So that's the difference in design philosophy. And then it turns into two aspects, the technical difference and the economic difference, economic model difference. So I talk about technical difference first. We have different consensus mechanism. The consensus mechanism, the NEO, is called delegated preventive fault tolerance. So it's or delegated BFT or DBFT. The advantage of DBFT is first it's very fast. It takes 15 seconds now for one block in NEO, and it could be it can be tuned to be faster, maybe 5 seconds or 3 seconds, similar to Stella and Repo. Yeah, and then we can. That's one point. And second, it had very good finality. You don't need to wait for 2 confirmations or 6 confirmations or maybe 30 confirmations to a transaction to be. You don't need to wait for that long. One confirmation is the final confirmation. You can make sure the transaction really went through. So that's the advantage of our consensus mechanism. And the second difference is the smart contract system. NEO is, I believe NEO is the second really usable smart contract system other than Ethereum smart contract. We launched our new smart contract system in August this year. And the big difference is you can use matured language like C# and Java, Python, JavaScript to write smart contract. And we developed some compiler to compile your code into the bytecode and run on our own virtual machine called NEO VM. So in this way, you can use the mature language. You can use your familiar IDE to write a smart contract. It's much easier, and all the tools are there. So that's the smart contract. And these two difference, consensus mechanism and smart contract, contributes to a much faster transaction per second throughput or the speed, scalability of NEO. Today, we can handle about 1,000 transactions per second today. But I think Ethereum maybe handle 20 or 30 transactions per second. So we are tens of times faster than other blockchains. So that's the technical difference. And there are some economic difference. There are two sides. One is economic model. In NEO, there are two tokens. We are the first blockchain used dual token system. We separate stake and utility. NEO token is a stake. When you holding NEO, you are holding the stake of the blockchain. You can vote for who can join the consensus process and how much the transactions fee should be. So that's a stake, and we call it governance token, NEO. And then the gas token. The gas token is for utility. You use gas to pay for everything, to deploy a smart contract, to pay for a transaction. So gas is a utility token. The good point of this is when you need to spend, you need to pay for a transaction. You don't need to reduce your percentage of the stake in the whole network. If you are holding 1% of NEO, of all the NEO, you always hold 1% of NEO. And when you are holding NEO, you will gradually, block by block, be rewarded some small amount of gas, but that is enough for you to pay for daily transactions. That's the token model difference. And then the transaction fees are very different. With Ethereum, every transaction need to pay a small amount of Ether or gas for the transaction fee. But with NEO, the first 10 gas is free. That means if you are sending money from one point to another, or you are doing some regular transactions, those users do not need to pay any transaction fee. It's zero fee. It's more like the internet model. It's freemium. But if you want to do some complicated, intensive smart contract, you want to deploy your contract, you need to pay for that. And it's quite expensive compared to other blockchains. So it's more like business are paying for the users. So it's a reversed paying model. So that's the economic difference. And there are some governance difference. With NEO, we reserved 50% of the token to foster the ecosystem. And we're still holding 50% of the token. That's a lot of money. It's about 1.5 billion US dollars today. So we are holding a fortune to help NEO to grow faster, to catch up with other blockchains. So if you guys are developers, marketers, or interested in doing business in blockchain, especially with NEO, I think those people will be rewarded in the future with all the tokens we hold. Yeah. Okay, that's basically the difference between us and Ethereum. I hope after my explanation you will have some idea of NEO. Thank you.
He also needs very little introduction, but he is the co-founder of Stellar and was the original co-founder of both eDonkey and Ripple.
So I'm Jed, founder of Stellar.org. And what Stellar is an internet-level protocol for payments. The idea is to be able to link any financial institution and payment network to any other in the world. And the reason why this is important, because if you know about sending money around the world now, you know that it's very broken, right? So now there's lots of different payment networks. There's ACH here in the US, there's SEPA in Europe, there's M-Pesa in Kenya, Alipay, all these different payment networks, but they don't interoperate. So when you want to send money between them, it involves middlemen and fees and time and expense. And just to kind of like walk you through why that is true, if we're in the same room and we're trying to send money to each other, I just simply hand you the money and it's free and instant. If we're at the same financial institution and I want to send you money, then my account is debited, yours is credited, it's probably free and instant. It gets a little more complicated when we're at different financial institutions. Maybe they don't have a formal relationship with each other and the money has to pass through some corresponding bank or some other entity out there in the world. And then what happens if the payment has to get reversed? So it takes a lot of time and expense. And then it gets even more complicated when you're dealing in different currencies. Like if I'm holding one currency and I want to send you another, then there's some exchange involved. Maybe there's currency volatility in the middle as the payment goes through this process. So it's this complicated system, and maybe it has to be complicated. There's lots of currencies in the world. There's lots of financial institutions. There's lots of ways people use money. But before you give up, I think you should take inspiration from something else, which is email. And in the early days of computing, with email, if you wanted to send a message to somebody, if you're on the same mainframe, you would leave it for them. And when they would log on, they would just get it. If you're on the same local area network, it was also pretty straightforward. You would send it over some protocol, they would receive it. Things started to get complicated when people had different local area networks and they were connected. You would actually have to specify the route through the network that your message would take. And if one of these machines failed or dropped, then your message would get lost, right? And it was this cumbersome system. And this all changed in 1982 when someone came up with what's called SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And what that is a common protocol for communications. And it allows anybody that's following this protocol to send a message to anybody else, and it will just go there. And so today we don't even think about sending a message, it just goes, right? And we expect it to be free and instant. And email has grown extremely rapidly. It's had huge benefits for our society and economy. And this is all because SMTP provides this open protocol for communications. Now this happened years ago. Why haven't we done a similar thing with money? Well, it turns out sending a payment is a little bit more complicated than sending an email. When I send an email, I can send you a message, I can send somebody else the exact same message. But when I send you a payment, if I send you $10, I better not be able to send someone else the exact same $10. And this is what's known as the double spend problem. And we didn't know how to solve this problem in a distributed way until 2009 when Bitcoin arrived, right? And Bitcoin is this awesome innovation, and what it does is it essentially provides a public ledger that everyone can trust and see out there in the world, but no one can change arbitrarily. So you can think of it as like this giant rock in the internet that you can chisel things on, and no one can change it, right? So now if I want to send you $10, I chisel it on the rock, and when I go to try to send it to somebody else, they can see that it's already on the rock and they won't accept it, right? So this is awesome. Bitcoin solves the double spend problem. But that's only one of kind of 4 problems that you need to solve to make this universal payment network. The other 3 issues are, You want to be able to represent any kind of asset or currency in the network. You want to be, people deal in different denominations all over the world, right? So, here you want to deal in dollars, Europe you want to use euros, on and on, like Mexican pesos. And to expect everybody to adopt a new currency is kind of unrealistic, right? So you want to be able to hold any kind of asset. And then you also want to make it where if I'm holding one asset and you're holding another, we should be able to still exchange with each other, right? It should be totally irrelevant if we're using different currencies, right? So you need to solve that. And then also, obviously, everyone in the world uses payments, so you need to make sure it scales to be able to be used by billions of people, right? So when we were designing Stellar, we were trying to solve these 3 remaining problems. And I'll just go through quickly how we did this, right? So with Stellar, to solve the issue of being able to hold any kind of asset in the network, Stellar has this concept of anchors. And what an anchor is, it's a financial institution or other entity that will hold your money for you, right? So what happens is you give an anchor, say $100, and then it puts a $100 token onto the network, right? And so now there's a digital dollar in the network that you can send around just like a Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like this. And the same goes with euros or any other kind of asset. You give it to the anchor puts it on the network for you. So this is great. So now anybody can hold any kind of currency in the network. And then the second problem is how do you make these things interoperable? So with Stellar, not only can you make a transaction from like A to B, like not only can I send you $100, but I can put up an order saying, hey, I have $100, I will sell it for 80 euros. And anyone can put up these orders. And so what it creates is a distributed order book, this virtual order book that's in the network. It's inside the distributed ledger. And so now when somebody wants to send, when they want to send a payment, it can go through one of these orders, right? So if somebody, I put up orders to sell dollar or buy dollars for euros, somebody else that wants to send money to Europe takes that order when they're sending a payment. So, and the cool thing about this is since it's all in the same system, the payment is atomic, meaning that it's either going to succeed or fail. No one will be caught holding some currency that they didn't want in the middle, right? And then the third thing is we need to make sure that the system still scales. And so from the beginning, we designed it with this in mind. And one of the ways that we did that is with the consensus protocol, right? So the consensus protocol and all these distributed systems, these blockchain distributed ledger systems, is what creates this giant rock in the world, right? So Bitcoin uses proof of work. And Stellar, we use this thing called SCP, the Stellar Consensus Protocol. It was designed by Professor David Mazeras of Stanford. And it doesn't use mining, so it's just a simple message passing between the participants, and it has a few kind of advantages. So it's very quick, so a transaction is confirmed within 5 seconds. So, and it's not reversible at that point. You don't have to wait for additional blocks or anything like this. Once it's confirmed by the network, it's confirmed. The transactions are very cheap because we don't have this expensive mining process, so there's not miners that you have to reward out there in the world. It's just a set of servers. It's more like email where people just run mail servers. You can just run a Stellar validator. And then it also has this model, this flexible trust model. And that's pretty important because with Bitcoin, you don't choose who you're trusting. It's just the people with lots of mining power. Whereas with Stellar, you can choose who are your validators, essentially, who are the people that you are listening to. And there's a lot more information about the protocol on our website if you're interested in the details. So again, what we were trying to build was this universal payment network where it didn't matter what financial institution you were using, whether it was a bank, something like Venmo or an MFI. If I was sending one currency, you were receiving another. All these things should interoperate, right? It should be this seamless world. And the thing that's so exciting about it is just very much like the internet. Like the creators of the internet didn't kind of anticipate what would come after that. They didn't anticipate things like Wikipedia or Airbnb. All these innovations just kind of arose once people were given this open platform. And Stellar is this open platform not for communication and information, but for commerce, right? And so it provides people not only financial inclusion, but economic access. It creates this level playing field for economic access. Now somebody, like some kid in Indonesia, can now receive like 10 cents from somebody in Mexico easily and quickly over the internet, which will be extremely powerful. And I think it remains to be seen what people build with it. So we're super excited about it. Stellar.
Duncan Davison, he's the co-founder of Bullpen Capital, and prior to Bullpen, he was the managing director of Vantage Point Ventures. You could introduce yourself.
Thank you. This is funny as hell. I'm not the technologist here, so I'm the investor. I do love everything going on here. So Bullpen Capital does a lot of investing in this ecosystem here. We've done one really stellar, if I can borrow a pun, blockchain company which is called Filament. doing the blockchain thing. So very sparse space, smart contracts, distributed apps happening in very, very small environments. And it's working, which is amazing to me. So they have a lot of the same ideas here. I'm not going to go through it all. They haven't quite launched it, but I love the project because you can see a trillion things out there. Years ago, I was in a company called Intertrust that invented digital rights management. Some of you may have heard of it. I actually took it public on the NASDAQ. So a side note, I always wondered what it would be like living in a bubble. And so I was able to take 2 companies public in the 1990s. And so I knew what a bubble was like. And I was just 2 days ago on a panel when Bitcoin went from, I don't know, 9,000 to 11,000 in about 2 hours, and then fell back down again. So I told the crowd, you're all doing ICOs. You ever wonder what it's like in a bubble? You're living in a bubble. This is what it feels like. It's great. So Intertrust is trying to build a distributed system of trust for handling rights, mostly selling content. And we ran into a whole bunch of problems. Like the most simple problem is, how do you know an element in the system is trusted? It's very hard to figure that out. Somebody's got to hold the root key and be the root source of trust. And if it gets screwed up, everybody, the whole system collapses. So we actually gave up on the grandiose vision when Bitcoin came along, when Satoshi wrote his or her or their whole piece. It was quite amazing. By the way, does anybody here know who Satoshi really is? Anybody? No? Whoever he, she, or they are, a couple days ago they were worth, I think, almost 10, maybe almost $11 billion. So they have just under 1 million Bitcoin at the bottom of the stack. So at 11,000 of Bitcoin, you can do the math. They went up into the Forbes, I don't know, 100 or something. It's quite amazing. I think they dropped down to be number 200th in the world, wherever they are. So if you are, wow. So just a final comment. I don't look at this as a technologist. I look at this as a business person. There's a bunch of questions we're going to talk about later, but it's clear to me that we're very early days and the models are not known yet, and we're seeing the models get thrown out and tested. I remember a story. Years ago, I was telling Disney, they asked me, what's the information superhighway going to be? Now, I don't think anybody here remembers that term. Anybody? You do? Okay. And I said, it's going to be the internet. And they went, rah, it can't be the internet. They were yelling at me, it's got to be something else. And they said, so what's the internet? I said, it's a network of networks. Rah, it can't be a network of networks. So eventually I won the battle with them because logic came through. So when I talk to people about the blockchain, they say, what is it, right? What's going to be the future of things? The blockchain, I think, is going to be the infrastructure, the rails of the next wave of the internet. And they go, rah, can't be right. And then I say to them, they ask me, what is a blockchain? I say, well, it isn't a blockchain. It's like a network of networks. And I get the same reaction. And you guys here who are in this world think that's all very logical. There could be Neo and something on top of Neo and multiple blockchains. But to the outside world, this just sounds like gobbledygook. They have no clue. And so, but that's what makes it fun. You're in a marketplace of models. These guys are all trying different models. There could be the Elastos model, the Neo model, the Ripple model, Stellar. These are all models being played out in the marketplace of models. And some are going to win and most are going to lose. This is what a bubble is really all about. So I'll leave you one last thing. All great technologies in human history came in a bubble. Railroads. There were 2 bubbles. Cars. There was a Henry Ford bubble. The internet, obviously. The bubble mentality, the boom, the desire to create something amazing and get rich off it is deep in human nature. If you see a new technology come along and it doesn't have this type of craziness, it's never going to happen. It takes this moment. So a lot of money is going to get lost, a lot of regulators are going to wring their hands and worry about widows and orphans. But this is how human technology advances. So this group of people, many of you here, are actually at the bleeding edge of creating something that's going to be great and wonderful in the next 25 or 30 years. So me, I've been through one bubble, so I'd like to be through another. But it's you guys who are going to drive this, so I'm going to sit here and try to pick off the good ones.
All right, and now for the panel, and 2 that actually came from the community itself. We actually asked the Stellar Reddit group if they had any questions, which a couple people submitted. And then afterwards, if we have time, we'll do questions from the audience. So to start with, given the makeup of this panel is some people doing blockchains in Asia, China, some here, and some people doing all this stuff, do you actually think the blockchain space will play out similar to the internet ecosystem and the fact that like we'll see segregated ecosystems in different blockchains based on countries? Or do you think it's actually going to play out differently than that and we'd see more of like a one ecosystem? Like how do you guys think that will play out?
You have the mic. Yeah, so you have the mic. Yeah, so I think, blockchain is more like the internet itself, not the companies built upon the blockchain or on the internet. So I think it will be much more global than things like Google, things like that, right? So it's just natural that it will be spanning geography. And one of the things that is so attractive about it is that it does span national borders, right? That it can be like this international thing. That's not to say that I don't think that there'll be lots of different protocols, but I think that they won't be regional.
I think the beauty of blockchain is it is open source. So the machine is transparent. So if the machine is really good, it works really good, there is no point other countries, other jurisdictions want to use the same method. And even if they don't use the same blockchain, they can copy the open source code and do their own job. Yeah, I think there will be some very similar blockchains running on in different countries.
Compare with blockchain with the internet, my answer is yes, it's very similar. But the difference is blockchain is kind of a mechanism. Next generation uses infrastructure, next generation infrastructure. And as a blockchain startup or the entrepreneur is very lucky. Why? In China, have also for every startup have a very tough question for you is how about BAT do that? Do you know the BAT right now here in China? The Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, like the Google or Facebook in globally. These things, if you are to the startup of internet, you are easily be copyed or be crushed by the big play. But blockchain is a new way. And you'll find the traditional financial institution very eager for the blockchain, but the internet, the jet or big play is not put a lot of attention, lot of resource for that, because the business model is change their current benefits. That is the chance for the blockchain startup or small company. I think a lot of potential in the future. Yeah.
Well, I see the internet as 4 layers. So first of all, there's the internet today, right? Built on top of the internet, of course, you have the Tor network, truly anonymous and so on. So and then on top of this internet, we have the blockchain. So everybody could apply for a Bitcoin ID or Ethereum ID. You don't need anybody's permission to transmit Bitcoin from one to the other. The third level of ID, of course, you may want to associate some alias to it because it's easier to remember, say Microsoft.com, Alibaba.com. And there you have to register a domain name. Again, there are people doing decentralized peer-to-peer domain name resolution right now. The fourth layer, like I said, we're building a smart web. Of course, when you hear about smart web, we have portals, macro portals based out of your smart router. And those macro portals, of course, is easily to locate your locale because of your entry point to the internet. So there, we have to work with our partners to comply with the regulations of local governments. For example, in order to host a website, usually you're required to do a KYC. You have to give your ID to it in case you're selling some fake items, and people would go, instead of complaining to the intermediary like Amazon or Alibaba, they complain directly to the police, right? So there, there are some, at least the macro server level, macro services level, I think there's a different market, have different kind of KYCs. Otherwise, they're pretty much all over the internet across the world.
all these answers are really good. In my view, historically, if the internet was left alone for a long time, and it grew into become sort of one major standard. The network effects to create that are very, very powerful. There are layers in it, you're right, and there's different things in it, but fundamentally the mass of it follows one set of protocols. And it has to be that way for things to interoperate. I think if the blockchain universe is left to its own devices for sufficient time, and that probably means another 20 years, something very similar would occur. There will probably be a lot of tokens or blockchains in vertical markets that are global, and there'll be some core base which is pretty universal for interoperability. The problem I see are governments, because the longer we can keep the central banks out of this, the better off we'll be. It's not that I'm against governance, it's just that the central bank's interest in creating a currency that's digital is completely the opposite of what you hear up here. They don't want you to have anonymous transactions. They're trying to kill cash because they don't want cash. They want to track everything. And they'll create their own version of a blockchain system, their own version of cryptocurrency, where they can track it all. And I think that'd be a very bad thing for humanity as well as my own personal life. So I don't really want that to happen. This isn't being recorded, is it? Live! So I hope they take a long time trying to figure it out. And the folks here and the folks here can drive this thing forward so the standards get evolved before they try to come in and distort them.
I think related to that question, going slightly deeper, like depending on not if like there will be the core protocol layer versus applications on top. One of the things that's very unique about this panel is particularly NEO has done a great job of building an international community and particularly engaging people in the West, not just where they are. And Stellar's also done a very good job of engaging the Asian ecosystem, particularly in Korea and in Singapore, where you guys have spent a lot of time over there. How do you guys respectively think about not just like the technology aspect of it, but like the community aspect of it, and how do you think about all these different international communities across lines and kind of building that, whether you're a new project or an existing one?
I think the key to build a good community is through communication and to be transparent. And we are trying to do it better. We're not doing perfect, and we made some mistake in communication and talking with the community. So yeah, we're trying to improve that. But I think the key fact to have a good community is because you need to have solid technology. Because especially the Western communities, you guys look at the source code, you guys look at the white paper. You really need to be a good product to attract a real community. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, payments work fairly well in the US and Europe. So we spend most of our time in the developing world. So we spend a lot of time in Nigeria and Southeast Asia just because that's where the pain is the greatest for like payments. And I think a lot of these blockchain technologies will have a similar trajectory as like mobile phone penetration. It took off way quicker in places like Indonesia and the Philippines just because they didn't have landlines before, so they can kind of leapfrog the existing technology. And I think we'll see a similar thing with this. So I think it'll come out of the developing world rather than vice versa.
And I need to add something?
And it's key for your project to have a token, and there are some price difference. Yeah. Okay.
What I see is that, as I said, the virtual machines talk to one another without directly opening up a socket. That kind of vision, actually, I got them like 18 years ago when I worked in Seattle. So I launched a startup in China. We have gone so far, even though it's too long for my family to imagine. But still, I think it's a pity for the international community, especially for the US community. After 18 years, we still don't have this kind of technology openly known to the public, right? So I challenge the developers here, right, in the United States. Can you imagine doing communication between two virtual machines without opening up a socket? On the other hand, I really know the expertise, the people willing to work for open source, willing to contribute to this well-being of humankind, right? So that's what I'm here for.
Anything something that you're good. You're good. Cool. I guess another question is, in your guys' presentation of what you guys were working on, as some of you guys mentioned, proof of work, at least right now, is the dominant consensus model, at least if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, although Ethereum is moving to proof of stake. And you guys are developing different consensus models that have different capabilities, whether that be faster transaction speeds or quicker finalities. How do you guys think about these multiple consensus models and how they will play out over time? Do you think that the consensus model will collapse down back into like the one core thing, or do you think there'll be multiple of these things that you'll have to manage? It also goes along the same thing of like, how do you guys actually think about the interoperability of these different blockchains, particularly if they're doing different consensus models?
And consensus model, I think, is difficult to do a comparison. Not what one is better, what one is not, because it's for different scenario. Even the POW, the blockchain is still very slow, 10 minutes, and POW is a very resource-consuming things, but they have their reason to exist. So they have a POW, POS, BFT. They are focused on for the different suitable scenario. So just like I don't think the future will have the consensus model to suitable every scenario. They have because in the real scenario, no matter business or our daily life, they have a different governance model. People want to work together with different way, and they need a different governance model and with different consensus model. So at least in the medium term, we have a different consensus model with different blockchain and suit for different business scenario. And the interaction between the cross-chain is important. And cross-chain not only one protocol just for digital assets exchange. They have more scenario like entity mapping, data exchange, and more. So just like the two countries, they cannot use one contract for to solve all the problem with countries. There's some for business, some for people, some for the army or collaboration. Like similar with the different blockchain. We have different interaction cross-chain protocol in the future, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with Li Jun. There are different governance models in different organizations. You don't vote for everything in military. So in blockchain, it's the same. In different scenarios, you need different governance model. And consensus mechanism is not just a technical term. It's also about how people reach consensus, how they governance, how they do things in the same direction. So I tend to agree with you. And yes, interoperability is very important. And there is one protocol with NEO called NEOX. It's a cross-chain interoperability protocol. So one token, the token in one blockchain can move to another token without any trusted third party, as long as both tokens support NEOX blockchain. So in the future, NEO, ontology blockchains, and other blockchain built with NEOX protocol, they can interact with each other. And even if Ethereum supports NEOX, then Ether from Ethereum can move to NEO. Everything can be linked together.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. I mean, I think each consensus method has its own trade-offs, and some are more appropriate for what you're doing versus others. So I don't know that there will be exactly a convergence to one consensus model. And the interoperability is kind of independent of the consensus model, because it doesn't matter even if you're using the same consensus method, the interoperability problem is basically the same. And also with Stellar, I mean, it's something that we are working on as well. And I mean, it's sort of designed from the beginning to be able to hold other kinds of assets and make things interoperable, but it can also make Stellar interoperable with other things, with like atomic cross-chain swaps and things like that. Lightning's like one of the big things that we're working on now. So.
This is CIA is listening in now. This is a very important question. I'll take a different perspective on it, which is more economic or business. I've seen these things that say that to mine a Bitcoin today is 20 barrels of oil of energy. You've probably seen this. It's a lot. And so they also say it's so many houses of electricity in America. It turns out that this number is scarier than it really is, because the number of little vampire things you plug in the wall that suck wasted energy because you don't mind them is like 100 times the amount of Bitcoin mining energy. But if you trend this out with the growth now of the system, it turns out that Bitcoin miners will use up 100% of the world's electrical grid by January of 2020. Right? That's not that far away. It's the wonder of exponential growth. Now, obviously, when something like that is going to happen, it won't happen. It's absurd. But it does say that the very slow and somewhat energy-intensive model of Bitcoin cannot be the scalable model for the whole system. These other models are much faster and they're cheaper, and the consensus is reached in a way that doesn't burn 20 barrels of oil or even 1 barrel of oil. On top of that, if you think about the internet, one of the gimmicks is that you throw packets away and you resend them. If you get down to cheaper and cheaper transactions, you don't really need to reach consensus, just throw them away. I mean, so what? You lose three pennies. There are models that work way down in the micro world that wouldn't work in the macro world. That, again, the battle of models is evolving. I think Lightning is an extremely interesting experiment. So you're involved, right?
Not involved.
You're familiar with it. It's a very interesting experiment. There's others out there. So I think my perspective is, from a business point of view, I don't want a model where it's 20 barrels of oil and all electricity in the universe just to mine a coin. The winner is not usually the first, nor the best. It's the first. I think Facebook was the 240th, maybe 243rd social network funded by VCs. And they still crushed everybody else, and I guess LinkedIn is still standing. The best. Everybody thinks technically beta was better than VHS. Anybody remember beta and VHS? But VHS won. So they created an ecosystem. And so we are early days. And so during the boom phase or the bubble phase, we had 100 car companies before it finally got down to a few. It's a wonderful time to be. You get into something now, the better quality environment you get into. Like, you'd rather been an Apple in 1978 than, say, Kentucky Fried Computers, which, by the way, went public, named Northstar. But you want to get into the best quality place you can and play along with it, because you're surfing this incredible wave. What happens is, as this bubble booms, and it's still going to keep going, if you're 6 months ahead of the next person, you have a huge advantage. 6 months is huge during this phase. And when the phase peaks and finally consolidates and go from 100 car companies down to a handful, everything changes. You're in this wonderful moment. Just get in the game, try to get in the game in a quality way, surf it as much as you can, and you will find wonderful things open up to you you can't even imagine right now. The opportunity horizon will keep expanding for you. Even if you fail, it's okay. Go do the next one. So I love these periods. This is a great period. I think blockchain, too, has got maybe a 15-year run before it gets boring. So you got a while, no matter what the governments do. But look at these people. These folks here are such pioneers. I'm in awe of them. They're really, truly in awe. Try to get into their projects.
So I have 2 points. One is, regarding blockchains. In this world, when I actually about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started to study what is blockchain. I often run into the word Turing complete. I think this area people should really go back to the fundamentals. They quote the word Turing complete too lightly. Okay, they don't really know what Turing is. And that said, really, take out your smartphone. Actually, there are at least 20 CPUs in them. And each and every one of them is Turing complete, but there's only one CPU can support applications. Other CPUs are performing the supporting role. Okay, in that regard, I consider blockchain actually is providing the supporting role to the new web. So then that's my second question. When we have a trustworthy smart web where we can trade ebooks and digital assets peer-to-peer, we're opening up completely new world. I really kind of think this is another 95 again. Imagine at least 99 more times than the blockchain itself opening up all of a sudden. So many opportunities out there. I encourage people, first of all, know what is really computer science. Then the opportunity is so obvious.
also probably say the selfish thing for them. I'm sure many of these projects are hiring, so if you guys are interested.
Yeah, right here.
So I was informed by some of the guys that we would probably have time for a couple questions. So if anybody from the audience has anything burning they want to ask, you raise your hand first, so we can go with you. And just you could yell, and if it's not loud enough, I'll repeat it.
Yeah. So like two projects have very like works right now recently. One is quantum, one is real. Without Hongfei, how do you think about it?
The question is, there's two major projects in China, Neo and Quantum. How does think about Quantum? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm a personal friend of Patrick Dai, who is the founder of Quantum. I think Quantum nowadays they're using EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, and the smart contract system. So they are kind of a part of the Ethereum ecosystem. But I heard they are trying to build a x86 virtual machine. So probably they will establish their own ecosystem, and they just realized EVM is not good choice, at least for them. So I think they are somehow repeat what we did in the past 1 or 2 years. Yeah.
Right here. We got big questions. Big questions. The Hongfei. Okay. Regarding ontology, could you expand on the Enteron consensus that's going to run on top of ontology?
What consensus?
Enteron. Okay.
Yes, just I mentioned, ontology is a chain network, right? Not only one blockchain. They can support different consensus model, including POW. Enteron is kind of, we want to have a random to choose the validating nodes. Maybe the DBFTs can voting for that. But sometimes if you have lots of token, actually it's decentralized. It's more like centralized sometimes, I think. But random select, everyone has the same chance to be the validating nodes. This is outrun the new consensus model. But I don't say that is best model. It depends on different scenarios. So we support different consensus model.
Maybe two more questions, and I'll move you.
Oh, sorry.
You can just yell it.
Okay. So this question is actually for Jed. So what's like the incentive for banks or people to hold tokens long term in remittances use cases when you're exchanging money overseas and converting it into fiat immediately? What does that mean for liquidity?
And just to repeat the question, it's like, what's the incentive for banks and other institutions to actually hold tokens over the long term, at least in the incentive rules or in the sell rules?
Right. So usually when you're sending money across the border, it's going, say, U.S. to Mexico, so it goes dollars to pesos, for instance, right? But if you're sending, say, like from Brazil to Thailand, it would go Brazilian real to Thai baht, and there's not a good exchange there, right? So lumens act as what we call like a bridge currency between these. So instead of having an order from Brazilian real to like 1,000 other currencies, you just have an order from Brazilian real to lumens, and then you can have an order from lumens to Thai baht or to naira or to pounds or whatever, right? And so basically, most of the people making the market in the seller network will be using lumens to do that, and so they'll have to be holding a certain amount of lumen float to facilitate these trades. So it's kind of the value of lumens is sort of the size of the pipe that might be through.
The winner is not usually the first, nor the best. So the first. I think Facebook was the 240th, maybe 243rd social network funded by VCs, and they still crushed everybody else. And I guess LinkedIn is still standing. The best. Everybody thinks technically beta was better than VHS. Anybody remember beta and VHS? Okay. But VHS won. So they created an ecosystem. And so we are early days. And so during the boom phase or the bubble phase, we had 100 car companies before it finally got down to a few. It's a wonderful time to be. You get into something now, the better quality environment you get into. Like you'd rather have been an Apple in 1978 than, say, Kentucky Fried Computers, which, by the way, went public, named Northstar. But you want to get into the best quality place you can and play along with it because you're surfing this incredible wave. What happens is, as this bubble booms, and it's still going to keep going, if you're 6 months ahead of the next person, you have a huge advantage. 6 months is huge during this phase. And when the phase peaks and finally consolidates and go from 100-card companies down to a handful, everything changes. You are in this wonderful moment. Just get in the game, try to get in the game in a quality way, surf it as much as you can, and you will find wonderful things open up to you can't even imagine right now. The opportunity horizon will keep expanding for you. Even if you fail, it's okay. Go do the next one. So I love these periods. This is a great period. I think blockchain too has got maybe a 15-year run before it gets boring. So you got a while, no matter what the governments do. And look at these people. These folks here are such pioneers. I'm in awe of them. They're really, truly in awe. Try to get into their projects.
So I have 2 points. One is, regarding blockchains. In this world, when I actually about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I started to study what is blockchain. I often run into the word Turing complete. I think this area people should really go back to the fundamentals. They quote the word Turing complete too lightly. Okay, they don't really know what Turing is. And that said, really, take out your smartphone. Actually, there are at least 20 CPUs in them. And every one of them is Turing complete, but there's only one CPU can support applications. Other CPUs are performing the supporting role, okay? In that regard, I consider blockchain actually is providing the supporting role to the new web. So then that's my second question. When we have a trustworthy smart web where we can trade ebooks and digital assets peer-to-peer, we're opening up completely new world. I really kind of think this is another 95 again. Imagine at least 99 more times than the blockchain itself opening up all of a sudden. So many opportunities out there. I encourage people, first of all, know what is really computer science. Then the opportunity is so obvious.
And I'll also probably say the selfish thing for them. I'm sure many of these projects are hiring, so if you guys are interested.
Yeah, right here.
So I was informed by some of the guys that we would probably have time for a couple questions. So if anybody from the audience has anything burning they want to ask, you raise your hand first, so we can go with you. Yeah. And just you can yell, and if it's not loud enough, I'll repeat it.
Yeah. So like two projects have pretty right now recently. One is content, one is yield. After that, Hongfei, how do you think about it?
The question is, there is two major projects in China, Neo and Quantum. How does Da think about Quantum?
Yeah, I'm a personal friend of Patrick Dai, who is a founder of Quantum. I think Quantum nowadays they're using EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine and the smart contract system. So they are kind of a part of the Ethereum ecosystem. But I heard they're trying to build a x86 virtual machine. So probably they will establish their own ecosystem, and they just realized EVM is not good choice, at least for them. So I think they are somehow repeat what we did in the past 1 or 2 years. Yeah.
Right here. We got big questions. Big question. The Hongfei. Regarding ontology, could you expand on the Enteron consensus that's going to run on top of ontology?
What consensus?
Enteron. Okay.
Yes, just I mentioned ontology is a chain network, right? Not only one blockchain. They can support different consensus models, include POW. Enteron is kind of, we want to have a random to choose the validating nodes. Maybe the DBFTs can voting for that. But sometimes if you have lots of token. Actually, it's decentralized. It's more like centralized. Sometimes I think it's, but random select, everyone has the same chance to be the validating nodes. This is outrun the new consensus model. But I don't say that is best model. It depends on different scenario. So we support different consensus model.
Maybe 2 more questions, and I'll give you.
Oh, sorry.
You can just yell it.
Okay. So this question is actually for Jed. So what's like the incentive for banks or people to hold tokens long-term in remittances use cases when you're exchanging money overseas and converting it into fiat immediately? What does that mean for liquidity?
And just to repeat the question, it's like, what's the incentive for banks and other institutions to actually hold tokens over the long term, at least in the consensus world, or in the cell world?
Right. So usually when you're sending money across the border, it's going, say, U.S. to Mexico, so it goes dollars to pesos, for instance, right? But if you're sending, say, like from Brazil to Thailand, it would go Brazilian real to Thai baht, and there's not a good exchange there, right? So lumens act as what we call like a bridge currency between these. So instead of having an order from Brazilian real to like 1,000 other currencies, you just have an order from Brazilian real to lumens, and then you can have an order from lumens to Thai baht or to naira or to pounds or whatever, right? And so basically, most of the people making the market in the seller network will be using lumens to do that, and so they'll have to be holding a certain amount of lumen float to facilitate these trades. So it's kind of, the value of lumens is sort of the size of the pipe that might be through.
Key focus. We are supporting community global health with a private healthcare blockchain that we're looking to work. So my question is for all of you. How do you suggest companies like myself to work with and partner with you all in helping building the next web?
I guess the question generally is like, if you're a developer looking to develop on any one of these platforms, how do you go and do that?
Well, it's also coming from the business point of view as well. There's a lot of models for us to understand and sort through. So would love your suggestions on how to work with the fundamental platforms you all are building.
Let me start with a non-technical answer and let them talk technology. First of all, the problem in digital health is a lot of government intervention. Venture capital loves the river going downstream, hate rocks in the river. Government regulation, big rock. Like to go around it. A lot of digital health being funded gets away from the normal healthcare system. So just keep that in mind. If you go out and get venture funding and you have a lot of healthcare system requirements, HIPAA, et cetera, the more you layer on, the less interest you'll see. The second thing is this. One of the magics of the blockchain, which I think is fascinating, is let's take peer-to-peer or business-to-business payments. There's a couple big companies, Coupa and Ariba, that have started this. And you have to sign in to everybody's Ariba thing to do your payment through Ariba. It's like a pain in the butt. The blockchain model would have one central system. You sign in once, and everybody can be a participant. It's like one global supply chain center. All the contracts, all the messages, all the payments, you just log in once and you do your thing in the subset. That is something that didn't exist before in people's consciousness until the blockchain has begun having people do that. So my second thing is think about that as the model. There's one unified central block system, ledger system. And you create a system where every participant plugs into it, and the transactions are transactions of record. And it's unlike Dropbox, you get mad and take your transaction out. It stays there. You can't take it away. You can't file it in Dropbox. Think of that model. I think that model is where the future is going to go. Whether or not there's an ICO behind it or a blockchain underneath it, the distributed ledger system like that is a very profound simplification of global supply chains. Right?
Yeah, at least with Stellar, we have a partnership program. So if you're actually building something on the Stellar ecosystem, then you can apply for a partnership grant and get like a large number of lumens if you're contributing to the network. I would say further, like if you're doing something that needs a token, you probably actually don't need your own blockchain. You can issue that token on Stellar, for instance, and that way you don't have to build that piece of technology, which is quite hard to build the actual consensus layer. And you can focus on actually running your business, but using this token on a robust ledger.
And one truth is just mentioned, you can build infrastructure, your application based on ontology infrastructure for that, and you can no care about the background, the blockchain, the infrastructure. But for the business part, you can think about business model. You can think about more fundamentally. Only one word is trust. you will find the trust issue. If there are scenario no trust issue, you needn't use the blockchain. The centralized system will make better performance for you. If you have a trust issue, and you can try to use a decentralized way to analyze how to cover or fix those kind of issue. That is important. Trust is a keyword of the blockchain. Yeah.
Well, to us, we're going to issue the Elastos chain by the end of this month. And then we're going to build a decentralized peer-to-peer network, open source, by the end of first quarter of next year. Beta version is the testing version. And hoping by the end of June, the second quarter of next month, we'll have some very preliminary, as I said, the browsers, the macro portals, so on, on this test network. So hoping in a year or so, we'll have kind of relatively mature, stable smart web for every one of us.
So sadly, that's all we have for questions. So I wanted to thank everybody on the panel and everybody for coming. So thank you guys.